So did you guys know that Ice Path and Seafoam Islands have the same song in Pokemon Gold, Silver, Crystal? I think also Heart Gold, Soul Silver. This is the Heart Gold, Soul Silver version. Um, I did not know that, but it kind of makes sense, right? Ice Path is like a precursor to Seafoam Islands, which is the domain of Articuno, if you're familiar at all with the in-game. And if you're not, then that's okay, because we're going to be talking about competitive, particularly Articuno on the Sandless Superman type of team. Now, that's not to say that Articuno cannot function with Tyranitar. It's a Pokemon that prefers there not to be sand, but not to say that it's completely ruined if there is sand. But some people, I think, have this conception of Superman that it has to be like this Tyranitar, Blissey, Scarm, Flygon, I don't know, Gengar, Zapdos type of team. And I want to say that there's a little bit more variety. Granted, the original Superman team is one of the best ones, and I recommend that you use it if you would like to learn about the Superman archetype. But I'm giving you kind of another option with this, hopefully. So let's get into it. All right, so the viability rankings. I don't see Articuno on here. Yeah, I mean, Articuno is not even ranked in the E tier, according to the sort of aggregate rankings from the 2024 VR. So we're going to have to go a little deeper, and we're going to pull up that Google Sheets that has all the Pokemon ranked on it. And as you can see, Articuno is chilling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the top, which doesn't seem that bad until I show you. Remember, Donphan is the last Pokemon that was ranked on the previous. But that means that Articuno is 64th. There were only 4 respondents to the poll that even ranked Articuno. McMegan put it at 45th. Jonold put it at 50th. AC7, I think sometimes referred to as Adam, put it at 54th. And Badummy put it at 56th. So that means that there are Pokemon such as Roselia and Wailord who outrank Articuno. Although, I want to say that Wailord is low-key a fraudulent ranking because the only person who rated it was Calavite. And I think Calavite put it somewhere like 40-something, which is, I mean, that's fine, I guess. But it was only one person who ranked it. Oh, come on, Articuno is consistently in that 45 to 55 area based on 4 rankings. Like, I feel like that probably deserves to be higher than Wailord, in my opinion. But I'm just a hater on the whale. For what reason? Absolutely no reason at all. I thought I've run into it once on ladder, and it blew up as I switched to like a Swampert, or not a Swampert. It was some sort of, maybe it was like a Celebi. I don't know, but I was like, wow, that's cool. And then proceeded to win the game anyway. That's not to say that Wailord is bad, but I do think Articuno is better if you pressed me on it. But that means that Articuno is the 5th highest ranked ice type. It's sitting behind Cloyster, Jinx, Regice, and Glalie. It'd be a little hard for me to argue that I think Articuno is better than any of these. I could see an argument some people might make that Articuno is better than Regice, and that's under the notion that you think that Spikes is extremely difficult to deal with, which honestly it kind of is. The Spikes are pretty dangerous in this tier. So I think that could be a reasonable take, but let's get the comment question. Which UUBL or lower Pokemon do you like on your Superman teams? I think, there's some interesting ones like the flying/levitating Pokemon like Articuno, like Misdreavus, like, I don't know, Jump Bluff maybe. But there's some kind of interesting ones that are in a, how should I say, like more in the vein of supporting your flyers, like say like Quagsire, for example, which I will say, if you're running Quagsire on Superman, having played around with my Quagsire Superman team and getting some advice from some good players, you might want to look into changing one of those Pokemon out for a Blissey, because Quagsire, it is good at beating mono waters. It is not good at beating any other form of waters. So, yeah, I mean, Blissey's going to help you out there. And Blissey is a Pokemon that Superman teams often want to run. But we're going to kind of go through this as a means of showing perhaps why you might be able to get away with not having Blissey on a Superman team. Not saying that it's better to not have Blissey, but if you don't want Blissey for whatever reason, then stick around. Let's talk about the special walls, speaking of Blissey. The special attackers in this tier are some of the most dangerous in the format, and that's thanks to their generally high speed, decent bulk, and access to Calm Mind. So the three that pop to my mind immediately would be Suicune, Jirachi, and Celebi. All of these Pokemon have, I mean, pretty respectable speed stats. Suicune is the slowest at base 85, but that's still a lot faster than things like your Tyrannitars and your Metagross. Now, granted, Suicune doesn't tend to run a lot of speed investment on its defensive sets, but it certainly can run more speed than the previously mentioned Tyranitar and Metagross if you want it to. But Jirachi and Celebi are like the platonic ideals of these Calm Mind boosters with good all-around stats, 100s across the board. It's pretty difficult to break them unless you have super effective coverage, and like if they get to like +2, +3, they're gonna just demolish your team. So some pretty scary Pokemon here, but thankfully we have some Pokemon with some good special bulk, and particularly Pokemon that have obviously a good special defense stat, and access to a healing move, phasing or the move Haze, explosion or self-destruct, and their own ways to boost can be decent counters to some of these Calm Mind users. Of course, your mileage may vary. Like somebody who's counter boosting against Suicune has to be wary that Suicune could just roar you. But nevertheless, it can be somewhat useful in the case where you're fighting a Jirachi. So let's take a look at these Pokemon here. The three that most come to mind when you say this sort of stuff is Blissey, Snorlax, and Regice. But I want to show that there are a few other options as well. On the left, we have Jirachi and Celebi, which is kind of ironic. Jirachi and Celebi are some of the better counters to Jirachi and Celebi. But, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Fire Punch, get the burn on either. It's super effective coverage. You can try to Body Slam with your own defensive Jirachi as well. You could counter boost, depending on what your coverage is versus them. You could maybe win that exchange. Celebi, generally, Calm Mind Celebi is beating the non-Calm Mind Celebi, unless the Calm Mind Celebi doesn't have Hidden Power Fire. But Celebi is decent into Jirachi if you can get the Leech Seed off. Now, be careful, because sometimes Jirachi runs Substitute, and if it's Substitute and faster than your Celebi, then, well, you're not beating Jirachi. So keep that in mind. But some other options here are UUBLs that kind of make the list. Well, ignore that Regice is UUBL. Are Articuno and Registeel. Both of these Pokemon have some really good special defense stats and access to some of the things that I talked about in this bullet point above them. So this is not a comprehensive list of every single special wall in the game, but this is going to give you like a smattering of Pokemon across the spectrum, and maybe you get inspired to use one of these on your team after I show you a little bit more about what their capabilities are. Because, you know, Tetrafolium video is not always about the Pokemon in the title, alright? It's about other things too. So, the general comparison of these, first we're going to look at stats. And I kind of have them color-coded. The gold, yellow is obviously the Pokemon that has the highest in that stat. This, like, it kind of looks like green, aquamarine almost, like it kind of gray as well. I don't know, I'm colorblind. Is going to be the Pokemon with the second highest. That orangish, bronzish is going to be the Pokemon with the third highest, and then we're going to have green and blue as sort of like good and not quite as good, but still okay, because none of these Pokemon have bad stats per se. 80 HP is a little bit on the lower side, but when you have a 200 Spadef or a 150 Spadef, I think we can forgive it, at least a little bit. So, yeah, Blissey obviously has the gargantuan 255 HP. Whoever thought that was a good idea? Keep cooking, because I want to see some more 255 base stat Pokemon. Let's get a 255 speed Pokemon in the next generation so that we can run a really fast Pokemon that runs absolutely no speed investment whatsoever. That would be hilarious. But that's not to discount the pretty good HP stats of all the other Pokemon. Snorlax obviously has got a really high 160, 100 from our mythicals, Jirachi and Celebi. Sometimes people refer to them as the Pixies. I guess I will also refer to them as the Pixies. So if you are wondering what that means Jirachi and Celebi with the 100s. That's pretty good. Articuno at 90. 100 would be a little bit better, so you can have that substitute idea, stalling out, say, a Seismic Toss. But 90 is okay, you can certainly work with that. And then 80s from our Regis are a little bit on the lower side, but not too bad. And then as for the special defense, Regice is by far and away the best with a 200, but Articuno has a 125, which is pretty respectable. As far as like special walls go, can't get much better than that, but you can get a little bit better because Registeel, of course, is the second highest at 150. See, I'm really good at pivoting out of my own mistakes like that, right? I digress. Snorlax with the 110, pretty good. Blissey a little bit higher at the 135. In fact, that would be the third highest of all. And then the Pixies sitting at 100, which is a little on the lower end for these special walls. But, I mean, 100, 100, you're not going to complain about that. There are some other Pokemon that kind of could fit into this just by their stats alone. I think Tyranitar has 100 HP and is it 100 Spadef as well? I think so, because Tyranitar is just broken. Yes, 100 Spadef as well. But thankfully, we don't see a Spadef boost for Tyranitar at all. So that is really, really nice. Because otherwise that thing would be ridiculous in this tier. But I digress. Now let's take a look at some of the moves. These are the recovery options that each of these Pokemon get. On the left side, we have basically the more interesting of them. Jirachi and Blissey both get Wish. And then Celebi and Blissey both get a more direct healing move in Recover and Soft Boiled, respectively. And then Leech Seed is also really nice for Celebi. Really, really good to run them in conjunction with each other when you want a really sturdy special wall out of your Blissey, because there are so many special attackers who would just kind of sit in on the Celebi, maybe try to go for Calm Mind Boost or something like that. Maybe Zapdos is just going to sit around and try to play for, like, I don't know, an HP Ice crit. I wouldn't do that, but maybe it tries to. And Leech Seed can punish all of those, so long as you have enough speed to get it off, or if they're not really threatening you with, say, Substitute, then certainly you can go for the Leech Seed. The rest of the Pokemon here are going to rely on Rest as their recovery move, which is, I mean, it's not bad on most of these Pokemon, considering that they have really good defensive stats, but it's not the ideal. Definitely something like Roost for Articuno would be really nice if that existed in this tier. If the Regis got Recover, if Snorlax got like Slack Off or something like that, that would be great, but we don't live in that format, so we're just going to have to take what it is. But honestly, the less recovery moves in the tier, I'm not going to say the better per se, but it does make games go quicker. So keep that in mind. Thank your lucky stars that Rest does not and Sleep Talk do not work the way that they do in Gen 2. Otherwise, we would have a pretty slow metagame. Well, Sand is going to be very different, so I guess things might change. I don't know. And then let's take a look at some of the moves that these Pokemon get that sort of dissuade a Calm Mind booster from boosting up in their face. We have Calm Mind on all of the left 3 Pokemon, the Pixies and Blissey. We have Amnesia on the Reggies, which is quite nice. Curse for Snorlax and Registeel. What that means is that they can kind of counter boost. It's not going to help them take special attacks that much better. I mean, frankly, it doesn't help them take special attacks better at all. But it does mean that you can threaten the opposing Calm Minder with +1 or +2 moves. While they're not going to quite hit you back as hard because you have a really high Spadef stat, or at least that's the sort of hope. But yeah, that's really nice. We have some Psych Up across the board. Jirachi, Celebi, Blissey. I don't know if I would ever use Psych Up on Blissey. Frankly, I don't even know if I would use Psych Up on any of these Pokemon that have Calm Mind instead, but alright. But probably the more commonly used of these is Regice. Because Regice has no way to boost its special attack itself, it sometimes likes to farm a Pokemon like Suicune for the Psych Up boost, and then it can threaten back with a strong Thunderbolt, force the Suicune to roar you out, and then you can maybe play for that sort of idea again. If they ever rest and you Psych Up the boost, you're 3-hit KOing them, so that can be really nice. I think you're 3-hit KOing them. It might depend on your special attack investment, but you obviously should be running a lot of special attack on Regice. With Registeel, you also have Psych Up. That could be interesting because it can kind of skirt the line between countering Curse users and countering Calm Mind users. But I don't know if that's necessarily the best route for Registeel to take, because Registeel has a really hard time actually breaking through some of these guys like Jirachi and Celebi and Suicune, because they have such high HP stats that your Seismic Tosses are not going to burst through them. But you have Boom, and that's going to be your I don't want to say get out of jail free button, because obviously if they switch on your Boom, then that could be really bad. But that's your emergency button, and both Snorlax and Regice also get that, so that's quite nice. And then I have in this sort of darker blue, maybe purple, don't know, again, I'm colorblind. And you say, well, then why do I color code things? Well, this is for you guys, all right? It's not helping me that much. It's helping you. But Parasong and Yawn are going to be moves that force Pokemon to switch because they have such bad effects if you don't. Parasong, of course, if you stay in for 3 turns, you will die. And Yawn, if you stay in for 1 turn, you will go to sleep, which is not a great thing to allow your sweeper to do. Some sweepers can maybe get away with it a little bit, like a Sleep Talk Suicune, but like, no, you generally don't want to just let your Pokemon go to sleep. And then I didn't talk at all about Articuno, but that's kind of because it doesn't have the same sort of utility as the rest of these Pokemon. No Psych Up, no Explosion, no Yawn, no Calm Mind, no nothing like that. But it is the only one out of these selection here that has Haze and Roar. So it's the only Phaser, it's also the only Hazer, so that's kind of interesting. Now, of course, if we expand our definition of Special Wall to much beyond this scope of, 7 Pokemon, which certainly there are more Pokemon that can classify as a Special Wall, there are going to be more opportunities to have moves like Roar, like say Tyranitar that has Roar, Swampert, Roar, you know. That's definitely, there's definitely more out there if you want that. If you don't necessarily want Articuno to be your special phaser, then you can certainly do other ones. But in any case, those other ones don't have quite as good a special defense stat as Articuno, so keep that in mind. Let's go on here and talk about the phasing specifically on Articuno. So Articuno has 3 sets that Smogon suggests. We're going to talk about all 3 of them, but they're all very similar In fact, this stat spread here is going to be, I think, common to all of them. And we'll talk a little bit more particularly about what this stat spread is going to help you achieve later. But this Articuno is sort of made by its Rest, Sleep Talk, Roar. All Articuno are going to have Ice Beam. Frankly, all Articuno are also going to have Rest. And many of them will have Sleep Talk. So Roar is really that move that makes this set. So ideally, you're looking to come in on Celebi or Swampert with this set. If Swampert does not have Rock Slide, then neither of these Pokemon will hurt Articuno that much, or they're simply going to waste their PP into Pressure, which is going to be a huge component of Articuno that we're going to talk about in the not too distant future. Your opponent will probably realize and switch out, and this is where you outpredict them and use Roar. So if you have Spikes, you can just get a lot more damage with your Roar on Articuno. And I know that it's like, well, duh, like forcing up switches is going to get Spikes damage, but like this is a thing that I think a lot of people will overlook in the builder. In fact, I'll overlook it sometimes. Like I'll throw Roar on something and I don't have Spikes to synergize well with it. Now, granted, that doesn't mean that you can never use Roar if you don't have Spikes on your team. There are plenty of other reasons to use Roar, but it's even better if you have the Spikes. And then sort of vice versa, Spikes are even better if you have Roar users. So if you have the opportunity to fit both Spikes and Roar onto your team, which is not a very heavy ask, then I recommend that if you can, swing it. Provided that the Pokemon are not Levitate or Flying types, who would most of the time be hit super effectively with Ice Beam. Some of them, of course, like Skarmory, have a dual type that make them not weak to Ice. And there's just rare Pokemon like Gengar and Mischievous. Well, Gengar's not that rare, but that are Levitate and do not have an Ice weak type to go along with it. Like your Claydolls and your Flygons are going to get hit for super effective damage, especially Flygon. Additionally, because they would have likely switched to their counter, say like a Metagross, for example, their active Pokemon will often not be the best answer to Articuno. So the real draw of this set is that when Articuno is sleeping, you can use Sleep Talk, and if it gets Roar, then Roar will be faster than the opponent, assuming that Articuno is faster than the opponent. So something like a Snorlax will come in, and you go for a Sleep Talk, and if you get Roar, then you'll Roar the Snorlax out before it gets a move off on you. Now, that's not to say against every Pokemon who's slower than Articuno, you should just be like fishing for that 1 in 3 Roar chance, but sometimes it can be useful, in particular if you're not that worried about keeping Articuno alive anymore, but you manage to get that Roar out, which is going to stack up some extra Spikes damage on something for an easier endgame. So could be a case for you there. It could also be really good at stopping Pokemon from trying to abuse Articuno's sleep turns by boosting up on it. So yeah, overall, I think this is a pretty solid set. You could use Haze instead of Roar. If you do that, I don't know if Sleep Talk is necessarily the most necessary move for that. The idea with that set would probably be that you're going to PP stall with Pressure, because Haze has 48 uses, which is goddamn way too many, but okay. That can be a decent alternative to this style of Articuno set, but I will say on many Articuno teams, you're probably going to be running Skarmory, so you might as well get that synergy between Roar and Spikes if you can handle it. The next thing we're going to talk about is that ability Pressure, though. I've kind of alluded to it a few times on that previous slide, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth. So Pressure is an ability that forces the target of the Pokemon that is targeting your Pokemon to use double the power points. And so that's going to be like direct moves, like your Brick Breaks, like your Seismic Tosses. It's going to cost you 2 PP to click that move into a Pressure Pokemon. but it's also going to include moves like Thunder Wave and Taunt, who are status moves, but target one particular Pokemon. I think that there's, like, technically with multi-target moves in a double battle, I think it gets an additional PP off from every one of the Pokemon that have it. So, like, say for example, you use Surf, and it targets your ally Zapdos, and then its enemies Articuno and Moltres. I think that would end up costing you 1 PP to use it, plus 3. Although I think that they also changed that in future generations, where if you target your ally with a multi-target move and they have pressure, then it doesn't activate. I don't know. Go look it up on Bulbapedia. I'm sure Gen 4 is weirdly different about it or something. I don't know. But not that it matters that much for the sake of this discussion, because we talk mostly about singles here. So, yeah, we're going to gear our discussion more towards the singles aspect. But some Pokemon that have the ability Pressure, of course, Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres. But you also have Suicune, Raikou, and Dusclops, which is, of course, the famous trio from the Generation 2 games. Well, you might be wondering, where's Entei? Well, Entei's there. It does have Pressure. But it's not a great Pokemon. I'm not saying that Entei is, like, unusable. I'm not saying that Entei is, like, strictly bad or anything like that, but I mean, it doesn't get a lot of use in OU, and there is a reason for that. Fire type, weak to spikes, that's not a great combo. But you also have Absol, and you have Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl is a well-represented Pokemon in the tier, but the issue is that it much would rather have its ability Rock Head. I guess if you're ever running an Aerodactyl that doesn't have Double Edge, then Pressure would be better, but I can't really envision too many, like, actually good Aerodactyl sets that don't have Rockhead, don't have Double Edge. I mean, I think maybe there's, like, a substitute Flamethrower, like, really cheesy Aerodactyl that is trying to do something that Aerodactyl's not really that good at doing, but could surprise somebody, that you could try that with. I don't know how good it is, though, but I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to tell me about how they hit 1697 with that sort of Aerodactyl, and it was the top of the ladder back in 2014 or whatever. But, alright, let's move on from that. The rest of these Pokemon up here are either, in the case of Raikou, it's its only ability, but all the rest of them are quite defensive, and even Raikou, to some degree, can facilitate stalling out. Say if you are up against a Blissey that has Thunderbolt and Ice Beam, but doesn't have Calm Mind, and you're playing in a Sandless game, then Raikou can stall that out pretty effectively. So, these Pokemon, again, are all really good at bleeding out, particularly passive Pokemon, of their PP. And if you can bleed them out of one of their particular moves, so say like Blissey bleeded out of Thunderbolts, well then maybe you have a Pokemon like Gyarados on your team who now will beat the Blissey because it doesn't have any more Thunderbolts. So keep that in mind. You don't have to PP stall them all the way to struggle to get value out of Pressure and that kind of PP stalling. And we're going to talk about more Articuno more particular. Same EV spread as the previous. You have Ice Beam and Protect or Sleep Talk with Substitute and Rest. So the idea with this set is that you're going to steal as much PP as possible while Articuno's on the field. The thing is that opponents are probably just going to switch against your Articuno. The sort of issue with pressure stall Pokemon is if you do not have enough strong moves, then your opponent can just switch back and forth between their Pokemon until you run out of moves, because switching costs 0 PP. So yeah, you can't do that much. But if you have something like spikes on their side of the field, that might be able to mitigate the effect of switching on your pressure staller. So that's not so bad. And then the sort of idea with this set is that Meteor Mash and Rock Slide, which are two of the most dangerous moves for Articuno to face, can maybe get stalled out of their PP as well. And because they only have 16 uses, effectively 8 against Articuno, you can get your substitute off. If they ever miss a move, you can go for like a protect, rest. I mean, if you have sleep talk over that, then you're not going to be very good at stalling out all the Meteor Mashes and Rock Slides, but I digress. I want to say that substitute is not necessarily required to make this an effective PP stalling set. Yes, substitute is really good at helping you block the water types. In particular, like Swampert and sometimes Starmie. If like Thunderbolt is a little bit of a problem for Articuno, but you know, Milotic as well. Like these Pokemon who can't really break a substitute on Articuno, and their best move otherwise to hit Articuno would be Toxic, just kind of get farmed. Now, the issue is like if you have, say, Milotic plus Suicune on a team, then they can pretty easily just swap back and forth. But that's why I'm saying Spikes is really, really key for this style of Articuno here. If you want this sort of like draining all the PP with Meteor Mash and Rock Slides, Suicune is actually a pretty decent partner with Articuno because it also has pressure and it can usually take Meteor Mash and Rock Slides pretty well. It's not obviously the most ideal Pokemon to take a bunch of Rock Slides because if you get flinched ever, then that can be really bad. But like Suicune is pretty decent into Metagross, pretty good into the Rock types. Depending on the sort of situation, it can switch in if it's healthy, if you don't have a bunch of spikes on your side of the field, etc., etc. So that could be an idea. Or you could just pair it with any Pokemon that handles Metagross and Tyranitar and Aerodactyl pretty well, and then let Articuno stall out all of the other Pokemon. In particular, Celebi is really, really susceptible to getting stalled out by Articuno. But if you don't want to use Substitute, a move that I would recommend to use instead would be Haze, because Haze has a ton of PP, and you can sometimes stall out things that you otherwise shouldn't, like Suicune, because Haze, I don't think Haze gets affected by pressure. So you have 48 clicks while they have rest, and sure, they might be able to click like 16 rest, and if they do it perfectly, then that runs you out of your hazes. But like, okay, they're out of rest and you're out of haze. Like, that's not so bad. Then they have to start clicking their surfs and calm minds and stuff, and I think that tends to, well, they, in theory, they have more PP, but you also have rest, so you can rest and stall them out. I don't know off the top of my head how much +6 does to Articuno. You might want to save some hazes for when they go for Calm Minds in that case, but yeah, that's the sort of concept with this Articuno PP stalling idea. Let's go on to the next thing, and let's talk about Cleric support. You're going to see Blissey down here in the middle, and that's not an accident. Clerics are going to refer to Pokemon that provide some type of restorative help to your team. Generally, this is going to mean Wish, Heal Bell, or Aromatherapy. So we're going to get a little Venn diagram here. So on the left are going to be Pokemon that have access to Wish. On the right are going to be Pokemon that have access to Heal Bell or Aromatherapy. Although I will say the best Pokemon that gets Aromatherapy is Blissey. The second best Pokemon is like, I don't know, Vileplume? So that's not like the most ideal thing. Not to say that Vileplume has no use or can't be decent or something like that on the right team. I'm trying not to speak in absolutes. I try not to say things to stifle people's creativity, but again, Vileplume is not seen very much for a reason. It's a pretty inconsistent Pokemon, and there are a lot of other Pokemon that do most of the things that it does better, namely Venusaur. But we're going to talk about the Wish Pokemon here. So on the left is going to be pretty much the Pokemon UUBL and higher that have Wish. There are a few exceptions, like Jinx and Exeggutor get Wish. I didn't know that. I don't think you would ever use it on them, but I don't know. Maybe somebody, again, is going to show me their Wish Jinx team that got to 1888 back in 2021 or something like that. I don't know. But you have your evolutions kind of on the left and the bottom. Espeon, Jolteon, Umbreon, Vaporeon, all of them are very good at doing this. I think the one Pokemon that really comes to mind when you talk about Wish is Jirachi, because it's such a good Wish passer, particularly on its defensive set. Well, I guess I should say it is good in certain contexts. It doesn't like the spikes, and oftentimes it wants to keep the Wish for itself. But against certain Pokemon that are not doing that much damage to Jirachi, you can pass that Wish. So it's not actually that terrible at doing the Wish passing. Salamence is a pretty interesting option with Wish. Keep in mind that Wish is like an event move for Salamence, so you can't have Wish and like all the nice egg moves that you might want to have. I really wanted to use a Hydro Pump Wish Salamence at some point, and unfortunately I came to realize that Hydro Pump was an egg move for Salamence, so you actually can't get it. I think it's an egg move anyway. Maybe it might be a event move, I'm not sure. Somebody will correct me in the comments. And then Gardevoir is also pretty interesting with Wish. It's not a particularly bulky Pokemon, it's not particularly great at passing the Wish, but you can kind of use its trace ability as like a counter trapping measure to Dugtrio, and Wish being your only healing option is kind of nice. So if Dugtrio locks into something like Aerial Ace, which is not going to kill the Gardevoir, you can kind of farm it for max Calm Mind boosts and then kill it. Or you could use it as a switch into something like Jolteon, who has that Volt Absorb, meaning that Gardevoir is not going to be able to be killed by the ensuing Thunderbolt. Then you can use that turn to Wish and then threaten to pass it to something, particularly something that switches in decently well to Jolteon. So, yeah, that's not so bad. Now let's talk about the Heal Bell users. And all of these Pokemon have Heal Bell. They don't have Aromatherapy. I would put Aromatherapy Pokemon in there, but, like, again, the best one is, like, Vileplume, so, like, it's not even UUBL, so we kind of skip over it. But Celebi is probably the most commonly used Heal Bell Pokemon. At least from my experience. I'm sure somebody could run the statistics and tell me that actually it's Miltank, but Heal Bell is really nice to have on something like a Celebi. It does kind of exacerbate the coverage issue that Celebi has. Some would call it 4 move slot syndrome. I think that is a BS term. I think that if a Pokemon has 12 good moves and it can't fit all 12 of them on a set, that doesn't mean that there's an issue. That just means that you have a lot of options. But in any case, I guess some people would say, well, if you choose one subset of 4 of those moves, then like there's certain matchups that Celebi doesn't have access to. But then my counter argument is, okay, well, if those are the only 4 moves that Celebi had, you wouldn't say 4 move slot syndrome, you would say that Celebi doesn't get good moves. So, in any case, again, argue about that in the comments section. Tell me I'm stupid or something. Dragonite, kind of interesting with it. It's a little bit more like an offensive idea with it, and you can kind of use Heal Bell for yourself. Although I don't know if I would say that Dragonite is particularly great at just tanking hits and going for Heal Bell, because Dragon Flying is, while it's not a bad defensive type, it does have some pretty exploitable weaknesses, namely Rock and Ice. Those are the moves that are going to be the most dangerous to hit into this Dragonite, and there are a lot of Pokemon that get access to those moves, so I don't know if you want to stay in, per se, and duel a Blissey who's Thunder Waving you and try to Heal Bell that off, because you're going to get popped with an Ice Beam, so yeah. Miltank is kind of interesting with this. It's got a lot of speed, so it can get the Heal Bell off on some slower Pokemon, like say Metagross is in. With no speed investment, Miltank is probably going to outspeed the Metagross, and you can get your Heal Bell off early. So, excuse me, I have hiccups. But that's kind of cool, and then you can use it in conjunction with Recover, well, Milk Drink in the case of Miltank, but then there's Recover for Celebi, of course, which is really nice. And then Articuno is our last Pokemon. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's probably something sticking out like a sore thumb to all of you who are very familiar with this tier, and Blissey being in the middle here, and that is there's a little bit of an asterisk on Blissey having access to both Wish and Heal Bell, and that is that they're using them both on the same Blissey set is not allowed. They're incompatible moves, because I believe that they're both, again, I can never tell if it's like egg moves or event moves or something like that, but I'm certain that Aromatherapy, which is what Blissey gets, is an egg move. Whether Heal Bell or Wish are egg moves or event moves, I'm not sure, but in any case, you can't have a Blissey. There's no possible way in cartridge to get a Blissey that has Wish and Heal Bell or Aromatherapy. I don't think there's even a way for you to get a Blissey that has Heal Bell and Aromatherapy, so that kind of nixes that whole idea of Blissey being the ultimate cleric. I don't think there are any Pokemon that get Wish and Heal Bell on the same set. I mean, except for Smeargle, that's the sort of exception to any sort of. There are no Pokemon that get X move plus Y move, but yeah. Let's talk about Articuno as a cleric. In particular, it's this move Heal Bell that makes this set what it is. So the idea with this, this is kind of interesting. They tell you where Heal Bell comes from. Articuno gets Heal Bell via Pokemon XD, and it can be a decent cleric. It's not as good in this role as Blissey, Celebi, or Miltank is. I will contend that maybe Blissey is technically a better Heal Beller, but in order to run Heal Bell, you're going to give up another move on Blissey, and I would say it's usually, in my opinion, better to have a second attacking move or Wish on Blissey over Heal Bell. That's maybe just a personal preference thing, or like a status move like Toxic or Thunder Wave. That might be a personal preference thing for me, but I don't tend to like to use Heal Bell on Blissey that often. But Celebi and Miltank I do think are pretty solid Heal Bell users. And the reason why they're comparing to all of these three is that you don't have that 50% recovery move on Articuno. There's no Recover, Soft Boiled, or Milk Drink for Articuno, and we're a generation too shy of it being a Roost spammer, so don't really have that either. But it lasts pretty long nonetheless, because it has great defensive stats, particularly on the special side, and you have Rest. We can choose to have a Rest Talk strategy with this, which is kind of interesting because you can roll Heal Bell with Sleep Talk, and if you use Heal Bell, you'll wake yourself up. So, kind of interesting, and it's really good at squeezing out extra uses of Heal Bell, because Heal Bell only has 8 PP, but if you roll it with Sleep Talk, it does not use that PP, so that's really good. Well, it uses Sleep Talk PP, but, I mean, it essentially will give you more opportunities to get the Heal Bell. Reflect is pretty good. It can help you against Metagross and Rock Slide users, particularly switching from Articuno to one of these Pokemon in on the Metagross or the Rock Slide user. I don't think you necessarily want to just take a Meteor Mash to your face for the sake of getting up the Reflect. I don't know if I would advise that. And if you're going to do that, you might want to run a little bit more speed, so that you don't get speed tied / outsped by the Metagross. So yeah, Toxic can be good into Pokemon like Tyranitar or Suicune. They do say Snorlax here. I mean, I don't know, I guess Snorlax might run Thick Fat sometimes, but most of the Snorlax that run Thick Fat usually have some other means of dealing with Toxic, like Rest, or Heal Bell support on their team. So yeah, I don't know if I would consider Snorlax so much. But you're kind of bad into Steels and Blissey if you do that. I mean, granted, Articuno is pretty bad into those in general, so I guess it's not really that much an issue. But you can use Roar, of course, though they argue that it's not quite as effective as the first set, which kind of makes some sense, right? Heal Bell, Roar, rather than Sleep Talk, Roar, so you don't have that synergy of the Sleep Talk. But like I maybe alluded to on those previous slides, is that sometimes you don't necessarily need that Sleep Talk. You can kind of get away with not having it against certain teams, and if you position your Articuno in such a way. But that is something that I encourage you to experiment with to figure out what Articuno fourth move on this sort of set is good for your team. In any case, this is the Articuno set that I am partial to, at least for the particular team that I'm going to be running, and I'm just going to run straight up the set that they suggest on Smogon, but I want to talk about some alternative spreads that you can do. So with 72 special attack and 176 speed def, you can still 3-hit KO offensive Swampert through its leftovers, of course, 2-hit KO Claydol, and you'll take a max of 50% from Rest Zapdos using Thunderbolt, which is, I mean, it's not like the most fantastic thing. It's not like you can rest loop that, but it can be an option for you to get your Articuno in and then get a Heal Bell off. If it's really, really dire for you, you absolutely need to get it. I don't know, say like one of the Pokemon on your team that is really, really needed for that end game. You need to get rid of the Toxic on it or something like that. Now, granted, Rest Zapdos is very commonly packing Toxic, so you're gonna have to think about like what you need, but I digress. Another thing is that 100 special attack is necessary to one-shot a 4 HP Marowak, and you'll need 224 with a plus special attack nature to KO a 252 HP Marowak. And the reason why I want to mention that is because the 8 speed that we're running here is so that we can outspeed Jolly Marowak. You could also run up to like 111 or 211 or 213 so that you can speed creep Suicune and get a faster Roar off on it. I think that that's not so bad if you're going to do, say, Roar instead of Sleep Talk on this set, or if you want to do Roar instead of Heal Bell. That's definitely a potential there. Now, I will say, you have to be a little bit cognizant of Last Mon Suicune, because Roar is not going to help you against that. Haze is actually a lot better into Last Mon Suicune, but you also have to force that situation, which is not always the easiest thing to do, because your opponent kind of has to cooperate with you on that. But in any case, we are going to stick with this set. I am not 100% sure what the special attack is trying to do for this. There's probably a 2-hit KO that it's securing somewhere that I'm not familiar with. Maybe it's like really good odds to do it on Zapdos when there's sand up or something like that. But I do know that the Spadef is going to allow us to live 3 Thunderbolts from a timid Starmie, and I think also from defensive Gengar, as long as sand is not up. Now, you could run a little bit more Spadef to try to make them better odds when you're in sand, but I mean, that's kind of up to you. I do invite you, though, to play around with the Spatak and Spadef of Articuno if you're going to use it on your team. And in fact, I have been running a few different Articuno teams. I'm going to show you the first one that I tested out, but I have been playing around with those stats a little bit. So this is the team structure, and I call this team Articuno Rest Spam because your eyes are gonna pop out of your head when you see how many Pokemon have Rest on this team. Okay, maybe not like actually, I'm not doing something crazy like Rest Skarmory, although that was a set that was used at some point, I think prior to the Sleep Talk mechanics being figured out. But I will be having Rest on Zapdos, Articuno, and Gyarados. So it's kind of interesting. And then I have another version of this team where I replaced Jirachi with a Pokemon that has Rest as well. So I've had up to 4 Rest users on this team before. So there you go. They appreciate the additional Spadef and Heal Bell support from Articuno, that being my Rest users, Gyarados and Zapdos. Flygon and Jirachi are the Rock Resist. Jirachi is going to also be an Ice Resist. If you notice on this team, we don't really have like a good Ice Resist. I mean, Articuno it's technically not a resist, but it has such a high Spadef that it can kind of wall most Ice coverage moves. But that being said, a lot of Pokemon that run Ice coverage also have Electric, which Articuno stomachs a lot better than most Electric weak Pokemon, but like it's not a surefire thing, you know? Some of these Pokemon have Calm Mind and will Calm Mind and then Thunderbolt, or they have like a really high special attack stat, like say Zapdos and Stab, and then they destroy your Articuno. But Jirachi is going to be a little bit better into those. We actually have a physically defensive Jirachi on this team, I think, which maybe, arguably, you should run more Spadef. And yeah, that's probably what I will recommend that you do, is maybe swap the... maybe not entirely swap the defense and special defense stats, because that seems a little overkill on the special defense side, but, you know, maybe divest a little bit from defense and put a little bit more into your Spadef, so that could be an option for you. In any case, Skarmory is going to be spreading Toxic and maintaining Spike's advantage. And then we have that Rest DD Gyarados and a CM Jirachi that will give us some solid win cons going into the mid and end game. And I want to note as well that Rest Gyarados is a Pokemon that it's a set that is pretty like infamous for like you use it in the mid game to do something, and then you put the Gyarados to sleep, and then it never does anything in the end game. But the idea, hopefully, is that Articuno can come in at some point and Heal Bell, and now I have my Gyarados back. So Gyarados can trade with something in the earlier mid game, and then still be a threat to win in the end game. That's the idea. But another thing that is a little bit of a challenge for this team, you kind of heard it when I was talking about Ice Resists, but is Electric coverage. So Skarmory, Articuno, and Gyarados are all weak to Electric, and our only Pokemon that is resisting Electric is Flygon. So you might want to look into something like Swampert to take the place of Jirachi as an alternative Rock Resist. That could give you a little bit of a sturdier edge into something like Zapdos. And yes, I know that Zapdos could run Hidden Power Grass, but you also have Flygon on this team, and Flygon can take a Hidden Power Grass pretty decent. So, yeah, this is sort of the team here. We're going to go into the battles, and then, you know, keep in mind if you see some sets for my particular team and you're like, I don't like that. Like, for example, Flygon doesn't have anything that it can do versus Skarmory, and you're like, I don't like that, then, like, I certainly encourage you to experiment a little bit. Maybe put Flamethrower on your Flygon so that you have a better move to hit Skarmory, and you're not as scared of getting hit with a Toxic by the Skarmory because you have Heal Bell with Articuno. Now, that being said, again, don't Don't just let everything get status, and don't just rest spam in like uncritically, because Articuno's not always going to be able to get that heal bell off, and sometimes you put yourself in a position where you have to sacrifice the Articuno to get the heal bell, which is not the ideal situation. So in any case, we're going to get into some battles here. Let's move here, put the scene on, and then we're going to do some new music here. So I know that this is not a battle theme by any means, but Frosty Forest from Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team is really, really cool. I think this is like, it's like, I get a weird mix of like nostalgia and dread from this sort of song. It's a little bit tense with that sort of strident, it's not bells, but probably like a glockenspiel, with that sort of repeating melody over the top. I love that it like transitions to a little bit more of a deeper timbre on the B section. I'm talking too much about the music. Let's get into the battles. Zapdos versus Tyranitar, one of the more common lead matchups, and I'm gonna switch. So I switched to Skarmory here. Reason being that it does decent into Rock Slide, it does decent into Ice Beam. I have some Pokemon that would switch in much better to Ice Beam, and some Pokemon that would switch much better into Rock Slide. I guess there is Jirachi there, but if it's... In either case, the Tyranitar is going to have a really good move to hit my Jirachi, and I don't have a great move to hit it back because I have Psychic and Fire Punch as my only two attacking moves. So, to me, Skarmory seems to be the most reasonable switch into Tyranitar. If Tyranitar rips a Fire Blast onto Zapdos immediately, and I switch to Skarmory, then, like, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, I guess if it was a lead pursuit Tyranitar, that would maybe make some sense, but yeah, I don't know about that. In any case, I am going to go for Protect, try to scout the Fire Blast. I don't think it's all that common for a lead mixed Tyranitar to be paired with Magneton. I guess it's not impossible, but that's why I didn't feel so bad about going for the Protect, but in reality, maybe I should have just went for a Spike there. And yeah, the Tyranitar, if it went for Fire Blast, it would have done a lot of damage to my Skarm, but maybe I can get Skarm back into the game, even after taking that. But in any case, I get to Protect again. We'll get to see what Fire-type move that this Moltres has, and it seems to be Flamethrower. Flamethrower is sometimes paired with Overheat, but in any case, Gyarados is a pretty safe switch into the Moltres. And then, if you've looked at the team paste, you'll know I have HP Rock, which will just straight up kill the Moltres because it missed its Will-O-Wisp, which is a little bit unfortunate. But that being said, even if it did hit me with the Will-O-Wisp, I would have done over 50% to the Moltres. And then I have Rest and I have Heal Bell to bring the Gyarados back. So it's not the most... it's not the worst thing in the world if Gyarados gets burned. They are going to go to Gengar, which is kind of interesting. I don't think that you see that many Moltres plus Gengar structures in ADV anymore. That's not to say that it's like bad, but they do have a lot of overlapping weaknesses, so it can be a little bit of a pain in the ass to use both of them, frankly. Of course, I know a little bit about that from that Quagsire team, but I kind of tripled down on that weakness by going with Articuno as well. So I get a holy roller right there, 40% roll to kill the Jirachi off, which is really, really nice. If I got a low roll, I guess it would have been able to maybe Wish, and that wouldn't have been great. But Zapdos could keep playing for the paralysis. Eventually, I would get either that or a crit, and that could maybe break us out of this Jirachi hellscape loop. And if not, then I could maybe just switch around, say like go to Gyarados. If this is Fire Punch Jirachi, It's very commonly going to be defensive. Obviously, you should probably calc it to be sure, but I think based on the damage that it did, 20%, it might have been defensive. Actually, I'm not sure. I don't know the head calcs like that. In any case, Tyranitar comes in. I know I live in Ice Beam, so I go for Thunderbolt, and it actually goes for Pursuit. So this seems to be a Pursuit Tar with Ice Beam as the fourth move, so that's kind of interesting. My opponent will go for Crunch there. I guess the idea is like, well, if neither Crunch nor Ice Beam kills, then Crunch is better to catch a switch in. But I don't know. Maybe Ice Beam would have killed there. Not sure. In any case, Zapdos is going to beat the Tyranitar, and then I can go to Jirachi on this Gengar. Because I have Psychic on the Jirachi, I'm threatening immediate damage onto this Gengar, which my opponent does not respect, as I go for the Psychic doing 80%. I can live another Thunderbolt based on the previous roll, so I will just go for Psychic again, and I catch Flygon switching in. I will go to Gyarados because Gyarados walls Flygon pretty well. I mean, yeah, Rock Slide is a little bit of a problem, but as long as it's not like banded Flygon, -1 Rock Slide is not going to be doing all that much to my Gyarados. Here, I'm going to rest my Zapdos on this Skarmory. At this stage, like, I don't really care about the Skarmory. I have so many resources, and most of my team is flying, so, like, who cares? And my Jirachi is already really, really low, so it was going to be basically sack fodder anyway, so every spike that goes up is just not really that relevant. This Flygon reveals to be HP Rock. Kind of interesting. But I'm going to use this opportunity to DD as I get Toxicked. Not great. I can't just go for Rest, though. This Skarmory is either going to spike or roar me out. If it spikes, who cares? And if it roars me out, okay, so what? I don't want my Gyarados to be... My Gyarados isn't going to 1v1 Skarmory anyway, so... In any case, they do manage to get all 3 layers up, so now my Jirachi is guaranteed dead on Switch, but that's literally the only Pokemon on this team that gets hurt by spikes, so yeah, we're kind of chilling. Skarmory will go for a Toxic on Articuno, which honestly is not that great a play. So I can just Heal Bell. In fact, I probably should have just went for Ice Beam again, because it would have covered this Flygon switch, it would have covered a Gengar switch. Skarmory goes for Protect, okay, who cares? But this is fine. I still have a really solid switch into opposing Flygon with my Flygon. I get the Toxic off on them, and they likewise get it on me, but all that means really is that their Flygon is on a timer. My Flygon is also on a timer, I guess, but I could always switch to Articuno and Heal Bell. In this stage, I'm actually going to go to Zapdos, and Zapdos is threatening a kill on both Skarmory and Gengar with Thunderbolt, so I'm going to go for Hidden Power Grass to get a little bit of extra chip onto the Flygon. If the Skarmory stayed in, okay, who cares? You Toxic me, and I will rest it off. If Gengar comes in, then it's one more attack away from dying, so that's fine with me. They go to Gengar, and I go to Jirachi just to sack. My thought being, well, if I go for Thunderbolt and kill the Gengar, that's fine, but maybe this Gengar has some crazy move like Hypnosis Blast that might somehow beat me. So I'm gonna sack the Jirachi there, and if they go for, like, if they reveal their last move as like HP Grass or some bullcrap like that, then I can just go back to Zapdos and win. In any case, they just hard switched to Skarmory, which I don't know if that was... I don't know what the intent behind that play was, but I can just go to Articuno and get the Heal Bell. I'm going to get roared out, which, okay, whatever. And then Gengar will come in. I'm going to set a Spike. The idea with setting a Spike there is literally just, I want Skarmory to roar me out, or I might just want Gengar to kill me. So I'm going for Spike and Toxic. It doesn't really matter. Like, I just don't want to switch a Pokemon in and get critical hit or paralyzed or something like that and have less chances to win the game. Skarmory is absolutely useless to me. It does nothing. In any case, I will go to Articuno, who should live a crit Thunderbolt and win the game from there. So there you go, the Articuno putting in that work. Can you believe that? 32% from a Thunderbolt from Gengar. That is what you get with Articuno when you're up against a defensive Gengar. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Tyranitar versus Zapdos. Again, a very common lead matchup. I'm going to go to Skarmory, so I stay true to my principles here. So I guess if you find me on the ladder, you go for that nasty Thunder or Fire Blast into my switch, then that could be something. Or if the Tyranitar has Substitute, that's usually pretty bad as well. In any case, I will switch the Zapdos into a Fire Punch and get burned, which is annoying, but it's not the worst thing in the world because I have Rest. And I will just go for it here as they go to Flygon. And these three, to me, suggest that this might be a Superman team. And then Skarmory comes in, and that all but confirms it. So, yeah. I will go back to Zapdos, who can farm some wake-up turns against the Skarm. And I go for a Sleep Talk, assuming that they don't know that I have Sleep Talk. And if I rolled a Thunderbolt, I would have destroyed them. I am just going to go for it again, because if I get a Thunderbolt, I do a lot of damage. If I get Roared, okay, I have to re-burn those Sleep Turns, but I took no damage, so I'm kind of okay with that. They are going to actually just go for Protect as I go for a Thunderbolt. And then I assume that they will switch, so I'm going to go to my Skarmory so I have an opportunity to get my spikes on the board. Because while, yes, he's a Superman team, he has both Tyranitar and Jirachi, whereas I only have Jirachi. So me getting 3 layers on his side of the field is going to be more important than him getting 3 layers on my side of the field. And I can fairly safely go for it against this Jirachi. Now, if it had went for a Body Slam and parried me, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world because I can Heal Bell that. If it had burned me, that could have been pretty bad. But once again, I still have Heal Bell, so status is like I shouldn't say that status is inconsequential to me, but I have room to play around it. This Jirachi's gonna wish as I'm paralyzed on my Zapdos and bring it to Gengar, and we'll never know what I clicked there because I just got full parried again. I'm gonna take that Ice Punch and rest. Could have been a little bit dangerous. Maybe if I got full parried again, then I'd have to go to Articuno and Heal Bell, and then like really awkwardly try to position my my Zapdos back into this game. But because that didn't happen, I can just go to Articuno and start clicking my Ice Beams into Gengar. I will rest here. We'll see what my opponent wants to do. They're in fact going to go to Flygon as I Sleep Talk and I roll Ice Beam and kill the Flygon. Critical hit I don't think mattered, and that's going to be a game right there. So yeah, you have to respect that Sleep Talk, in particular from Articuno. And I know that, I mean, my opponent's at what, 13, 15? Probably has never seen an Articuno on the ladder in their life, so I can't fault you if that's the case, not knowing that the Articuno might go for Sleep Talk there, but Sleep Talk is a pretty common move, and I mean, I had Sleep Talk Zapdos. I don't know if that sort of telegraphs that you're going to have Sleep Talk on Articuno necessarily. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen an Articuno team built quite like this one. I do play a player on ladder every now and then with the name Mom's Dump Truck, which is, I mean, that's a name for sure. But they are also using an Articuno team. I think they also have Skarmory and Flygon, but they don't quite have the same sort of construction. They have, I believe, a Tyranitar. Kind of interesting. You should queue up on ladder around 1600 and see if you can queue into them. In any case, Zapdos versus Slacking, not the most common lead matchup. I am going to go to Skarmory still, because I think that clicking anything other than return there is a little bit risky for my opponent. If they caught my Skarmory with a Focus Punch, then well played to them. I could try to go to Gyarados and DD up and maybe win. In that case, I will go for a DD in front of the Zard as they reveal a Metagross here. I'm going to go for Earthquake because the only thing they can do to kill Gyarados is blow up. And they do go for that, so it's a little bit unfortunate, but I can go to Flygon, who covers both of these Pokemon well because I have Protect. I will go for a Toxic because I was anticipating maybe that they would go to one of their unrevealed rather than Charizard, but if they go to Charizard, then I get the Toxic off. If they stay in Slacking for whatever unforsaken reason, I can just get that Toxic off on the Slacking, and now it's on a timer, and my Flygon should just win one-on-one very, very easily in that case. I will go for a Protect Scouting to see if it has a hidden power for me. I don't trust it, so I will go to Zapdos, who gets hit with a super effective critical hit HP Ice. So very well skilled by my opponent. I mean, granted, when you play a team that has to switch around to defensive pivots, like inevitably you're going to get crit on one of these switches. So that's just how it is. I will go to Jirachi now, who takes a Fire Blast. Really bad for me. I guess I figure that Zapdos is going to be a little better for me than Jirachi is. So it is what it is. I think I will just stay in and go for a Wish. Which is kind of nice because I can get my Zapdos back into the game. Except I for sure cannot, because that's not how Wish works. I will switch to Skarmory though as they go for Return, which is like, okay, I don't know why they didn't try to predict the Skarm switch there, but okay. They reveal Snorlax, kind of interesting. Snorlax plus Slacking. I know they're not exactly the same Pokemon, but you would think that they would have a lot of overlap, right? I go for a Protect, scouting a Self-Destruct. They go for Double Edge, so I feel okay to go for Roar there, and then they Self-Destruct. Alright, fair enough. But we get the same sort of idea here, where Flygon can just switch into both Charizard and Slacking. And we're going to see a Dawn Fan on this team. Very, very strange. I'm thinking that there's got to be a Pursuit Trapper last. But in any case, I can go for an Ice Beam. If I get hit with an HP Rock or a Rock Slide, I mean, that sucks, but I have to get some damage on that Dawn Fan so that I don't just completely lose. And I get a crit, so very nice. Maybe I could have went to Flygon, but if I get Toxic or something like that, then yeah, Flygon's not winning. So Slacking comes in. I can go to Zapdos and sack that, which means now I can go to Flygon, and then I will go for a Rock Slide, predicting Charizard to come in. But they actually reveal their last as Sceptile, which is something, I guess. I figure if it's got HP Ice, I kind of just lose anyway, so I'm going to go for Toxic. I was also kind of hoping maybe they would just go for something innocuous like Leech Seed, but they actually have Dragon Claw, and Dragon Claw does, like, no damage to Flygon. And you know what? Now that I'm looking at this team again, I think this is Slactile offense by Zets. Huh. Okay. Interesting. So I made this Dawn Fan video not too long ago, and like many of you have seen it, of course. But like Dawn Fan on a team that doesn't have Pursuit is a little bit dubious. I mean, in this case, it kind of worked out because there's a lot of pressure going into the Skarmory, but I don't know if my opponent necessarily played this, at least not at the beginning, in such a way that they recognize that there's a big Skarm weakness on this team. I think that you try to go for an aggressive Focus Punch on a Skarm switch, if you can, because Skarm's going to stack hazards, and then the issue with Skarm stacking hazards is there's nothing on this team that is really, really all that threatening to Gengar, especially one that has Thunderbolt plus Will-O-Wisp. So, yeah, keep all of that in mind when you're running that slack tile offense teams. You have to play really aggressive into the combination of Skarm and Gengar, and you kind of have to just assume that your opponent has it off rip, because if you don't and they play around you, then you're going to lose with this team. I don't have Gengar, so it's not as big a deal, but yeah, it's not. Keep that in mind if you're playing that team. I'll go to Articuno, who should just wall the Sceptile. It is, because it's slack tile offense, I know this Sceptile does not have Leech Seed, unless they change that. They go for a Hidden Power Fire. Very, very strong 25% into the Articuno, which is, alright, whatever. And then I'm going to actually stay in and Ice Beam this Charizard. The reason why I do that is not because I predicted them to go for HP Ice, but it's because Articuno, believe it or not, would live a Flamethrower from Charizard at that health. Now, Blaze Boosted, not so much, and if it was Fire Blast, I mean, it's a little bit of a problem, but they could miss. And I figured that they might try to predict my Flygon switch anyway, so all signs were leading towards Articuno could possibly win this endgame if I just go for Ice Beam. Regardless of what my opponent does. Their best play would have been Fire Blast, and if they miss Fire Blast, then okay, like, that's fine. But also, there's the chance that if I go to Flygon on them clicking Fire Blast, that I could get burned on my Flygon, and then I'd probably just lose anyway. But now that I've got that damage on Charizard, I don't really care. I can just stay in with the Articuno, sack it even, and then protect. Flygon should just win the game. They go for another Hidden Power Ice, trying to play for my choke, but I did not choke in that game, so there we go. I guess I should say I choke in a lot of games, but and you should be playing for something like that. I don't disagree with the Hidden Power Ice play on turn 27. On turn 26, though, I mean, maybe go for the fire move if you have it. If it's Flamethrower, though, as long as I don't get crit, then I'm kind of okay. I am rocking a different avatar in this one for no reason, really. I don't even really know why I had a different avatar, but we're actually a little bit higher up on the ladder, near 1600, as I see a lead Smeargle, and this is like, I hate this new wave of speed pass that's been going on the ladder with Smeargle. I used to think that Ninjask was the culprit, but Smeargle's a bastard too, so in any case, I'm gonna get a spike up as they baton pass to Charizard. It's like, okay, that's fine. I want to use this as a point to, or to reiterate a point that I think I've made in other videos, but having a team that is good into Skarmory does not mean you have Charizard, which threatens the Oko. Now, Charizard can be on a team that's good against Skarmory and like threaten the Oko. In fact, I think it is a pretty good Pokemon into Skarmory, but a Charizard team does not necessarily mean good into Skarmory, because yes, you're threatening that Oko, but what Skarmory in their right mind is going to stay in on a Fire Blast from Charizard? Well, some people are gamers and would roar on the Charizard substitute turn, which would have been a really awesome play if I did it, but I didn't, so I just go to Zapdos. I will take that Flamethrower, and Flamethrower is not so bad for me. Fire Blast would threaten the 2-hit KO, but I would be burning some PP, and that could be important, because if I can burn all of the Fire Blast PP, then Charizard has no move to hit Articuno, and Articuno can kind of just stay in and wall, which is a thing that you'll have to do with this team sometimes. Sometimes there'll be a Pokemon that has ice coverage, and you need to stall it out of all of its ice moves so that Zapdos can win the game. Or, like this Charizard, stall it out of all of its fire moves so Articuno can win the game. And such. But this team is pretty sturdy and can manage to do that. Zapdos is not super duper bulky, but because I have a more offensive Sleep Talk Zapdos. But like, of course, you could make it a little bulkier for your own purposes, or you can do some finagling and things like that. But you know, all you need is Zapdos to be able to take some hits from some Pokemon, not every hit from every Pokemon. So, yeah, they have a Miltank on this team, thick fat Miltank against my Articuno. We both have Heal Bell Pokemon from the UBL tier, so that's kind of cool. Unfortunately, I get paralyzed on my Scarm there, but that's kind of okay because I can go for Toxic. Predicting a Charizard switch is actually what I was literally predicting that. If it happened to be on the Miltank as well, that would have been fine. But I miss, so Toxic moment. I will go to Gyarados though, because that's a very sturdy switch to the Charizard. Unless Charizard is running something like Rock Slide or Hidden Power Electric, which are both pretty uncommon, then I'm kind of safe here. With this Scarm, I'm just going to go for another layer of spikes, at least force this Starmie to go for a Rapid Spin, which allows me to get a decently free Jirachi entry. Based on the Ice Beam, I'm guessing that this is a offensive Starmie, so it probably doesn't have Thunder Wave. So I can go for my Calm Mind, get a little bit of damage on the Celebi. I get a Burn, which is really nice, because that's going to leave it low. And then Miltank will come in as I switch to Zapdos. I sort of figured that they would switch. Didn't know what they would switch to, but Miltank is going to whiff a Thunder Wave into my already paralyzed Skarmory. I'm going to try to go for a Toxic. Doesn't really work out as the Starmie goes for Thunderbolt, which, like I said, doesn't do that much to Articuno. This is a offensive Starmie with max special attack. Not modest, but in any case. My opponent does not respect my ability to get Sleep Talk Ice Beam as they go to Celebi. I guess it kind of pays off for them. And they're going to Baton Pass to the Starmie. I can Ice Beam. I don't quite KO that substitute from the Starmie, but a second one will do it. And then I can kind of just play to run this thing out of Thunderbolts. It says 20 Thunderbolts there, but it's actually double the amount used because they've only clicked, I think they've only clicked Thunderbolt into Articuno at this stage. I managed to get a Heal Bell off to wake myself back up. And they go for Transform on the Smeargle, which is like, okay. Of all the Pokemon that I have, probably Articuno is the least valuable to transform into. Because like its only attacking move is Ice Beam, and I have Jirachi who can just set up on it if I want to. I'm actually gonna go for Psychic. It would get some damage on the Smeargle, which could be nice, and it covers switches to Miltank and Charizard, who are probably the most dangerous to switch in. And I mean, if Celebi comes in, well, then I can just Fire Punch it. So, pretty nice for me. Although I think the Celebi is a little faster than my Jirachi, so maybe I go for a Calm Mind instead. In any case, Psychic was really good. I get a critical hit on the Charizard, which is really, really fortunate. I still have a very healthy Gyarados to switch in, and getting like the Psychic damage on Charizard at all would have been really, really good for going into the end game, but the critical hit helps out a lot, obviously. I'm going to stay in with Jirachi, predicting my opponent to go for Spore, and now I'm going to switch to Articuno, predicting them to transform, and then I can just go back to Jirachi and wake it back up. Because, yeah, Smeargle's Ice Beam, or I should say Articuno's Ice Beam from the Smeargle transformed into it is not going to do that much. I am just going to stay in and play for another wake up here. It is kind of interesting, though. I'm looking at this team now, and it's a substitute Baton Pass Celebi, but the Smeargle doesn't have, like, Dragon Dance or something like that. In any case, I'm going to just click Heal Bell as my opponent transforms. They're going to hard switch to Celebi as I go to Jirachi, and then they're going to forfeit the game. I don't know if they should have forfeited there. They could have played for some more Leech Seeds and stuff like that, but what this game was gearing up for was that I was going to just switch back and forth between Articuno, Jirachi, maybe Zapdos, until this Celebi runs out of Leech Seeds. And then I should win the game from there. And That is the thing about this team. I spared everybody the 200 turn replays, but there are some games where you are going to play long games. I've played a 330 turn draw with this team because my opponent was playing another kind of stall team, but I realized that they had Imprison, Rest, Dusclops, so I would have lost the game unless I got into a position where my two pressure Pokemon, Zapdos and Articuno, were already asleep, and then I could swap back and forth between them so that I'd never get Will-O-Wisped. But the issue was I couldn't keep spikes on the field because they had Claydol, and I was unable to kill the Claydol. So what ended up happening essentially was once I got into the position where my two birds were asleep, the only play I could really make was to just switch back and forth between them. And the only play that my opponent could make would be to switch back and forth between their Pokemon as well, because their only win condition was to get Imprison off while one of my birds was awake, so that they could stop my birds from going to sleep and then Will-O-Wisp them. So we had to draw there. So yes, I will say, this team, it's stall matchup, you are going to have to just be smarter than your opponent. Which, I know my viewer base, you guys are not built for that. No, I'm kidding. You're probably more built for it than I am, I'll be honest. But in any case, I promise you, no triple digits. Unless the last one's triple digits, we'll see. I get a Focus Punch on my Flygon there. I sort of anticipate that this Regirock is going to want to switch, but they go for another Focus Punch on me, and that sucks. So I'm just going to protect here as they boom. And you know what? I'll take that. The Celebi is in. They're going to Leech Seed my Skarm. Not super duper cool of them. And they have Hidden Power Fire too, which is really, really not cool. But I will be able to get a Spike Up, and that is plenty of progress against this Regirock Celebi team. I'm kind of shocked that they don't have Magneton. But I guess if you have Hidden Power Fire Celebi, maybe you get away with not having Magneton. In any case, I'm going to go to Gyarados because I want to force this Metagross to think about booming. Instead, we're going to see a Tyranitar, and I don't want to stay in and take a fat Rock Slide. I am going to stay in with my Flygon, though, and just take that Double Edge and die. Now I can go to Gyarados. Gyarados is bulky enough to live a neutral Rock Slide, and I can go for Dragon Dance. As my opponent switches to Claydol. But I don't have a move to hit Claydol because I'm, of course, HP Rock Earthquake. And I'm not trying to reveal that and do no damage to the Claydol, so I'm going to switch. My opponent might think that I switched because I was afraid of Boom, even. So, and if that is what my opponent is thinking, then that could be good because I'm concealing my moveset a little bit. I managed to get a Spike Up against the Metagross, but it gets a Raise against me. I'm going to have to roar it out. Thankfully, I was at enough HP that I was able to do that. But against this Tyranitar, I'm going to go for Roar because I don't want it to get a Dragon Dance. And now I can get Gyarados in, get the Intimidate off on the Tyranitar, and they're going to switch to Claydol. So I double to Articuno. Now I can get an Ice Beam and threaten the 2-hit KO. But even better, I just get a critical hit, which, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's not exactly why I made that play. I wasn't playing for the crit. I was playing to get a big amount of damage on Claydol so that hopefully I could 2-hit KO it with Zapdos HP Grass later. But, you know, that crit is really fortunate because I get to keep that Spike on the field. I assumed that they were going to go for Rapid Spin. But, yeah, now we're in the driver's seat. I am going to go to Gyarados, intimidate this Tyranitar, take a Rock Slide and get crit, and I'd say that kind of balances out the karmic debt there. My sort of idea was that I could go for that Intimidate. Tyranitar would not kill me with Rock Slide. They can't really go for a Dragon Dance and I would be able to get a Earthquake off if they switch to Metagross. Bad. If they switch to Celebi, okay. I could maybe get a rest off against the Celebi because I mean Leech Seed, Hidden Power, Fire, Calm Mind is maybe possible. But it's not super duper likely. I'm thinking that based on the pace of this team, this is probably Leech 3 attacks Celebi. And Gyarados can pretty safely rest against that, and then I can get into Articuno, heal that off, and all of this basically means that Tyranitar is taking another turn of Spike's Chip. But because of the crit, I'm going to have to go to Zapdos, and I finish off the Tyranitar there, because I correctly identify that this has got to be a max attack Tyranitar with not very much bulk. And even if it isn't, I have modest Zapdos, so I'm pretty good there. I will stay in with the Jirachi on the Celebi. It missed one of its Leech Seeds, which is kind of important because it gives me an extra turn to do something. They go for HP Fire. They do not go for Calm Mind, so I think I'm right that this is not a Calm Mind Celebi. I will go for a Wish here, which is maybe not the best play. But that's okay, because I can go to Articuno, which is going to get all that HP back, threatens the Celebi, so I can double to Zapdos. There we go. Good play on my part. I'm going to pat myself on the back there. It protects, which is interesting. That reveals that it is probably a bulky attacker Metagross, which has no move to hit Zapdos other than Boom or Rock Slide. But like, come on, you're not doing Rock Slide on bulky Metagross. Let's be honest. It might have also had say Toxic, but if it revealed Toxic there, like very very uncommon to be Meteor Mash, protect, Toxic, Boom. Like that's not a real set. So if it revealed Toxic there, I would have got free chip healing on this Jirachi, and then I could switch back to Zapdos. As long as I don't get massively crit or they get a ton of attack raises, then I think I should be fine to 1v1 with the Zapdos. And then I can just simply go to Articuno as they go to Celebi. My Ice Beam is going to kill them because they are Leech 3 attacks with not very much bulk, and they reveal Gyarados last. I can simply just switch to Zapdos. They go for Dragon Dance, and they're going to need a move to kill my Zapdos, even if they're HP Rock, which they happen to be. But because I have enough bulk on my Zapdos, I will live that, and I win. So there we go. Alright, final game here. This is not a 100-turn game, but this one's going to be really funny. I remember it. I was thinking, they have like the Bird Keeper thing. I wonder how they feel about playing into Superman. And they have a lead Aerodactyl, which is kind of funny. We'll go to Flygon here, because Flygon's a decently good switch into Aerodactyl. Even if it went for Double Edge, I can at least like protect, get some HP back, and then now I know that they're that kind of player. I go for Toxic as they go to Gengar immediately, so they're probably playing a Superman team as well, of some sort, or possibly El Clasico, which is not really a Superman team, but some people like to pretend that it is. In any case, we're going to just get some spikes up. I know that El Clasico has 4 spike immune Pokemon, and if this is a Superman team full-blown, then most likely Blissey is their only grounded Pokemon, or they may also have, say, Tyranitar. But getting spikes down for the Blissey is important, because my team is not super duper great at taking out Blissey, especially when there's not spikes up. But if there are spikes up, then what I can do is just indefinitely switch between Zapdos and Articuno to run this thing out of its moves, and then win the game from there, especially if it doesn't have Ice Beam. I got full paralyzed a few turns in a row there. My opponent is going to go for Ice Beam, probably predicting a switch. I get a Heal Bell off, which means that I can get a faster rest. They go for a Thunder Wave, of course, you cheeser. And yeah, I will simply just block that. I'll take my turn of to burn rather than go for heal bell, because I'd actually rather, if the Blissey stays in, attack into my Articuno while I'm not spending any PP, because we may get into a situation here where I'm going to have to stall the Blissey out of moves. And I'm thinking about that on turn 17, because this, turn 17, of course, is the most important turn of the game. But, especially to get your spikes up. This is a reference to my draft league. But it's also, like, important to recognize, like, you know, this team doesn't have a great breaker into Blissey, so our main way to deal with it is to run it out of moves. I skipped a turn there. Blissey will come in, get hit with Thunderbolt for a solid 20%, and then get paralyzed. I will just go to Jirachi here. It gets Thunderwaved, which is not ideal, but again, I still have... what is it called? I still have Heal Bell if I need it. But I can start threatening to Calm Mind all the way up and beat this Blissey. Because it's Seismic Toss Ice Beam, it just does not have a move to hit me. And then they go to Magmar. What emo? 1461? I mean, that's pretty respectable, I guess, to be using a Magmar team up here. I don't know if they just built this, or this is their first game trying it out. I would have got a nice Psychic off on the Magmar, but I get fully paralyzed there. I am going to hard switch the Gyarados out, because I'm trying to see if this thing has Thunder Punch. It goes for Hidden Power, and it hits Flygon. I assume that that's Grass, so maybe Gyarados is fine. But I am going to switch again to Jirachi, see if I can get their last move to be revealed. To see if they have like anything for the Flygon. But they seem to be Focus Punch, so I know that my Gyarados should just straight up wall this. Yeah, that's how much Hidden Power Grass does. And I can just go for Dragon Dance boost. If I get to +2, I'm faster than Aerodactyl, and they just let me get to +2. I will actually even just go to +3. I should probably just start clicking attacks here. But they are going to go for a Fire Blast here. Doesn't burn me, doesn't crit me, which is kind of nice. They are going to go for another Fire Blast. Burn or crit would be really bad. But they are forced to switch. I go for HP Rock, because that would easily kill the Magmar, and it also gets damage on Skarmory. But when they switch it in, they get crit. So that's really, really bad. I go for another HP Rock as they go for presumably Roar, and it's over. And it's like, yeah, nothing on this team is going to live. The combination of HP Rock and Earthquake, and yeah. So, what do I have to say about this Magmar team? You know, I've done some weird things with El Clasico as well. I don't know if Magmar is close to being the thing that you try to stick on El Clasico. But, yeah. Kind of interesting. I think they probably should have went for more Fire Blast into the Gyarados. Their win condition was probably to, or their stop them from losing condition would have been to try to get a burn on Gyarados, force me to rest, and then Skarm can come in and Whirlwind me out, in which case we play a more long, drawn-out game where it's probably going to be I get all my spikes up, they get all their spikes up, and then my Jirachi's dead if they do that. It's probably just dead either way. And then I'm just going to be Articuno walling the Blissey and all that. But they could maybe get some good double-edge plays onto my Flygon, in which case I'm really screwed because both of my Rock Resist would be dead, but I digress. They have a Magmar. It's kind of an interesting idea, though. And that's been Articuno. Again, I spared you guys the 100, 200, 300 turn games that I've played with this team. More particularly, I've been playing with a slightly different variation of this. That has a little bit of tweaks here and there. I am not going to share that version though. Not because I am like trying to hide teams from you guys, but because I want to encourage you all to like take this team and not just like play with the sample uncritically, but sort of like make your own tweaks and see what you can come up with that fits better for you. Because this might make some sense for me. You might look at that Zapdos EV spread and say, I don't understand what the Zapdos is trying to do at all, and then switch that up. Or you might be like, I don't like Gyarados as the DD sweeper, and then use Salamence instead if you want. Like, there are lots of ways that you could go about this, and I encourage you to just try out and see what works for you. And yeah, I will also want to reiterate that this is a pretty slow-paced team. I would not call this stall by any means. We have a pretty strong Zapdos. We have Calm Mind and DD sweepers on the team, but it is definitely a little bit on the like bulkier side. I would say maybe bulky offense. You could maybe even argue like bulky like balance, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of hard to argue balance when there's no Blissey, but it's it definitely can play a slower pace. And if you are not into that sort of thing, then stop being a baby. I mean, like maybe skip on this team. But that's been it for Articuno. I know somebody has been asking for Articuno. Not quite as much as I've been asked for Weezing, but I hope this is going to be satisfying to you out there who wants the Articuno team. So that'll be it, and we'll see you for the next one.